for the purposes of this podcast, do you want to be referred to as Tuffy, or do you want to use your...
Yeah, just Tuffy.
Okay.
No one really seems to use my real name anymore.
And is it Lil Tuffy with the apostrophe?
Yeah, the apostrophe is
without
optional.
the apostrophe? Okay, I'm an editor, so I need these things.
I don't really have a preference either way.
That was gig poster artist Lil Tuffy. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco. Every week on this podcast, you'll hear from artists, dancers, bartenders, and other San Franciscans telling stories and responding to the question, what is it about this place? Happy New Year, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 6, Part 1. Tuffy moved to San Francisco in the late 90s, partly for a job, but more so because of the then vibrant music scene here. In this podcast, he'll talk about his foray into venues and bartending in the city. He ends the episode talking about the night in 2010 when the San Francisco Giants won their first World Series. Here's Lil Tuffy.
I moved to San Francisco. The company I worked for got bought, and we got transferred out here. So we became Quicken.com, basically. So I worked in a lot of financial websites back then. It was perfect timing when they announced that. I was actually out here interviewing for new jobs. I had come out to visit here quite a bit through work, and it became apparent that this is where I was supposed to be. I was out here during Noise Pop, and that was one of my first music experiences here. And like looking through the paper, like every band I ever wanted to see was playing like in the next month, which was not the case when I was in Pittsburgh. Like a lot of bands came through there once and never came back again. So it was more for, the social life, and my interest in music is what brought me out here. The job was the necessary evil. I wanted to work in music, and I did a lot of stuff on the side and at night. I started a small record label, which was a huge failure. Like starting a record label just because you want to design album covers is not really the best decision.
Was it fun until it ended?
I mean, it was fun until you had to get paid, and like trying to chase money around and like deal with egos and deal with your friends and trying to figure out who's getting paid for what, and then never ever paying any bills. And so it was short-lived. Well, yeah, I mean, when I lived in Pittsburgh, we were traveling a lot. We were renting cars and driving to DC and Baltimore and Cleveland and Chicago to see all these bands that were bypassing Pittsburgh, or Wheeling, West Virginia, and Morgantown, like Columbus, Ohio. So I spent a lot of time in music venues before I came out here. But even when I moved out here in the late 90s, there was already big changes happening in San Francisco. Not quite as bad as they are now, but like the Kilowatt stopped doing shows, and the Trocadero, the Paradise, watching that neighborhood change drastically and having venues closed to become office spaces. It was shocking then, and to have it happen again, it's so much worse this time. But yeah, it's great that some of those venues are still here. Bottom of the Hill is, an old stalwart, and such amazing history there.
And you mentioned Parkside.
Yeah, the Parkside, when I started there, it was still mostly a restaurant and bar, and then we started doing shows there. I brought in my PA. It was like really DIY.
I was going to ask if you had a hand in getting music started.
I was doing some booking at another bar that's now closed, and I started working with those guys and helping with like the first Budget Rock and that kind of stuff, and helping book country bands and rockabilly stuff. So yeah, then we tore out all the booths and built a small stage and slowly upgraded all the equipment, and it became kind of like this garage rock mecca for a while. And it was really cool being there for that. And that's right when I first started doing posters as well. So it was a really cohesive environment to be in. It was probably around 2001, 2002.
Okay.
I think is when that started. In like 2003, it really started to kind of take off. And at the time, I lived in like the old Best Foods mayonnaise warehouse. So I'd have like after parties as well. So bands that would, for some reason, a lot of Detroit bands would end up partying at my house around 2 a.m. and
nothing to do with your being from there, or?
Not really. I mean, because I never really spent any formative years there. Like I moved away when I was pretty young. But for the first couple years of doing posters and doing that stuff, I was kind of known as the Detroit guy, and they kept calling me a Detroit artist, which isn't really true. But yeah, for some reason, like the Detroit Cobras and the Dirt Bombs, and it seemed like every time they came to town, there'd end up being some all-night party at my house, and I lived above a brewery, so they'd donate a keg. My roommate worked for Lucky Strike, so there'd be free cigarettes everywhere. There was various other party favors from people I knew in town, and it was usually a pretty good time. I moved to San Francisco in 1997. I initially did design work in the tech field before the first .com bomb. And then shortly after 2000, I retired from that field, I guess, and I started bartending and booking bands, Thee Parkside, and did my first couple gig posters there. And it was more of a hobby than anything else. And then I started working with the Firehouse, and I got a few jobs for Bob and the Hill and a few other venues around town. And it just slowly became a full-time career. I kept bartending up until about 5 years ago. And when the bar got sold, I decided to focus solely on this, and became apparent I probably should have done that a little sooner, but, it's hard to get out of the bar life. Yeah, I kind of started bartending by accident when I was starting to do stuff at the Parkside. I was just kind of hanging out there one day, and it was super busy, and I just kind of got up and started helping. And
without being asked?
Yeah, kind of. Like, there's just, I started washing dishes and taking stuff and whatever, and they're like, okay, we'll pour this beer, make this drink, do that. I'm like, okay. And then, like, when it was over, like, yeah, you did an okay job. We had no idea, like, you knew how to bartend. I'm like, well, I don't. I've just been sitting here watching people for years. So, like, they gave me a chance, and I started bartending every once in a while and learning a little bit. And then when the ownership flip-flopped, I just became the manager all of a sudden, and ended up
the bar manager.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, which happens every time this happens, but so yeah, I did that for a while, and then kind of burned out. Working like 6 days a week from open to close was a bit much, and then I took a step away. And then I injured myself and didn't really work for a while, and then once I finally was able to walk and carry stuff again, I took a Monday night shift at Pop's, just basically to kind of get out of the house and start doing stuff again. And I worked there for a couple years doing various things, and then one day I decided to fix a bunch of stuff, and the owners were like, oh, it's about time someone like stepped up, so you can run the place now. And that's kind of how that happened as well.
Kind of the same story almost.
Yeah.
You said you were there when the Giants clinched the World Series in 2010.
Yeah.
Which of course is, I would say, the only one that matters, but still to me the best. Do you want to talk about that night? Are you a Giants fan?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that night at the bar?
Yeah, it was pretty I mean, the whole, like, that whole end of the season and the playoffs was pretty crazy. And back then, 8 years ago, a lot of bars were still like anti-sports. They wouldn't show baseball games or basketball games. And because a couple of our other bartenders were huge Giants fans, we were already set up and equipped for that. And I brought in my big screen TV, so we had multiple TVs to watch on. We had someone DJing during the commercials, so we didn't have to listen to stupid ads. And
was the bar just, because where I was loud enough that we didn't have to hear Joe Buck's voice?
Yeah. That was the other thing. Like, we were trying to figure out how we could get rid of Joe Buck as much as possible. But it was also because no one else was really playing sports. Like, we were packed. So, I think it was like Pops, J&B, the 500. Like, those were like the few bars where you could watch playoffs and the World Series that season. And then, like, over the next couple of years, I watched all these bars suddenly like, oh, we'll have the Giants on, the playoffs on, and like putting up projectors and stuff.
I was going to say, going back to what you said about at least in 2010, bars being reluctant. I wonder what happened between
Yeah.
all the championships of all the teams around here. It's been a crazy run. But anyway.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I guess because, I don't know, the Niners and, the Super Bowl is always big at bars, but every Sunday it doesn't really seem to matter. But for some reason, that baseball thing really became a thing. And I think that's also carried over to the Warriors as well. I know, I wasn't the biggest basketball fan, and I used to be super annoyed when someone would come in and oh, can you put the basketball game on? I'm like, oh, the Warriors are playing tonight? And they're like, oh, no, I don't know, Milwaukee or something. I'm like, no, we're not going to watch some out-of-market game right now. I want to watch Point Break. So.
Could we go back to the night of Game 5?
I remember we had to close after the game because it was just insane. And 24th and York and the Mission, it's kind of police aren't going to be coming anytime soon. I remember fireworks going underneath cars and people firing guns into the air, and then two of my friends, one of them got punched and one of them tripped, but they both broke their nose and broke a tooth. And their reactions were just polar opposites of each other. One of them's cheery and happy and laughing about it, and the other one's just having a complete meltdown, and screaming how she needs to get an ambulance, go to the hospital. I'm like, it's 2 blocks away. You could walk. But it was a interesting night. And then just having to close the bar because it was just so rowdy outside and so many people, and one of the few nights of the year that we actually close.
What did you do after the bar closed?
Then I made my way to Mission Street, and I think I left my bike at the bar, and I remember just walking around, and by that point, buses are being turned over and garbage cans are being lit on fire in the middle of the street. And at the time I lived right by the Beauty Bar, and I remember being at that intersection and people firing guns off, and I'm like, okay, maybe it's time to duck inside somewhere. And I think almost all 3 World Series I ended up at the Lexington to finish celebrating. I got stuck in Beauty Bar the last time because they wouldn't let anyone out for a while until they cleared the intersection. And then I think that night at the Lexington, I had to show them my ID to show them that I lived right there. And I'm your neighbor. I just want to, I'm not going to break anything. Yeah, seeing that it reminded me of Critical Mass in the late 90s. And when it used to be just gigantic, and they would block the entirety of downtown to the Mission. They're just thousands of cyclists, and how irate drivers would get and just laying on their horn, and eventually just start driving into bicycles, and out of the weird frustration, whatever mental break they finally have, and then the same thing, U-locks being hurled into car windows and fights. And yeah, my Instagram is LIL_Tuffy. I think you just Google Lil Tuffy and all the relevant social media and links show up.
That was poster artist Lil Tuffy. Check back Thursday for part 2, when Tuffy shares how he got into the poster business and became the prolific artist he is today. Music for the podcast is by Otis McDonald, aka Joe Big Ale. Film photography is by Michelle Kilfeather. Follow Storied San Francisco on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to like, share, and comment on our work. All the episodes, from seasons 1 and 2, are up on our website, storiedsf.com. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review the show. Send comments or suggestions to storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.